Hello and welcome back to the podcast Little Girls Aren't Taught This. I am your host, Self-Love Lydia, former self-love coach turned somatic trauma trained psychotherapist. That feels like a title that I am getting used to. And the work that I do with women is really about bringing them back to their bodies so they can find safety and connection. In this podcast, I like to talk through issues that we should have been taught as little girls, things that would have made our development so much easier, things that really would have helped us be more connected and more authentic as we grew into women. So this is my little intro. I am gonna ride into that intro because I still think I need to smooth it out a little bit. But this week we are going into change in identity and how you can navigate that. So I hope you enjoy this week's podcast episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast Little Girls Aren't Taught This. How are you doing as you listen to this? I hope that your day is going okay. And wherever you're listening to this, however you're listening to this, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are a new listener of mine, welcome. I am Lydia, somatic psychotherapist and co-founder of the safe space for trauma healing and transformation. I am Arla, and I also do my own private practice work doing somatic and talk-based psychotherapy with women, helping them come back to their bodies, helping them find connection again. So if you are a listener who's been here before, welcome. Thank you for coming back. And this week I want to talk about glimmers versus triggers. And I also want to share some ways that you can self-resource on your healing journey. But not only just on your healing journey, just for this life that is very stressful and very fast-paced. And at the moment, something that is, bringing us a lot of heaviness, a lot of collective trauma being felt around what's going on. And in this episode, I just wanted to really share ways that you can resource, because that feels really important. So I think as well, a lot of the time in our healing journey, there's a lot of talk around triggers, and I think there's not as much conversation around ways to resource and also to find glimmers, which are the opposite of triggers. So that is just what I wanted to go into for this episode. So welcome. Right, let's get into it. So glimmers are the opposite of triggers. I don't know if you know what these things are. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe you haven't. But I think what will be really nice is I'm going to try and keep this episode quite short. And it would be really nice for you to, after this episode, spend some time just thinking about, what your glimmers are, who are your glimmers, and ways that you can resource internally and externally. So, like I've just said, glimmers are the opposite of triggers. They signal safety and they help you find joy and peace. Now, if we think about any kind of healing work, usually it is going into our wounds, isn't it? Usually it is noticing our triggers. Life, a lot of the time, we will notice or we will remember more being triggered than what we do when we are feeling joyful, when we are feeling at peace, when we are feeling safe. It's just how our minds are wired, and it's just as human beings, we tend to notice more the triggers or maybe, the upsetting points in our journey. So when we think about glimmers, they signal safety and help you find joy and peace, whereas triggers signal potential threat and danger. So again, think about it in any type of healing work that you're doing. When you're feeling triggered, the sensation that brings forward in your body. Again, one of my offerings when you listen to this podcast episode is just to get really curious, and it might not be now, but just as you go about your day, your week, just notice how you feel when you're triggered compared to how you feel when you're in a glimmer or you're with a glimmer, and just really start to notice the different effects and the different sensations that they bring in your body, because glimmers are also really beautiful to help you, down-regulate if you're feeling quite activated. Then noticing, so in that down-regulation, which is coming out of an activated space, being able to notice how it feels when you start to regulate, and notice what that safety maybe feels like in your body, noticing what joy feels like in your body, noticing what peace feels like, because, you know, we can conceptualize that and think about that cognitively, but it's really, really nice. I think especially when you're doing this healing work, especially around this type of stuff, you know, glimmers, nervous system, safety, all of these different things, to really notice these like concepts from a felt sense, almost like embodied way. So that is just another little offering from this podcast episode. So there was 2 that I said then. So sorry, I've kind of like been a bit scattered with the beginning of this, but the 2 little offerings from this podcast episode are: notice what your glimmers are, notice how it feels when you're triggered versus to when you're in a glimmer. Notice that sensation, that felt sense in your body. Okay, so let me just start again. Glimmers are the opposite of triggers. They signal safety and help you find joy and peace, like I've just said. Triggers signal potential threat and danger. Okay, so think about that in any situation, in any kind of any situation that you have in life, even if it's a conflict with a partner. When we're triggered, it feels like we're under threat, or it feels like there is a danger to us. Now, that might be like a far out concept, but think about even like these parts of self, think about the ego, think about all of these protective mechanisms, think about all of these parts of you that are just trying to cover your wounds. You know, if you've listened to the internal family episode, you know, think about the role of your firefighters, of your managers, to just try their best to stop that exile wound coming into space. So how the body mind kind of registers that is as a danger and as a threat. So glimmers activate your ventral nervous system, which is when we're talking about that down regulation, when we're talking about that feeling of being regulated. This is what it activates when we're in a glimmer. So and that allows you to connect more with yourself, others, and the world around you. So again, think about healing work, even think about any trauma work. When you're disconnected from yourself, that halts your ability to be connected to the world around you. So when you're internally disconnected, you're externally disconnected as well. So when we're in our glimmers, or when we spend more time around glimmers and then we drop into that ventral, we're more open to being connected to ourselves and our external environment, because we feel safer to do that. Where triggers are the opposite, they activate the hyper arousal fight or flight, or the dorsal shutdown, both dysregulated states of being. Okay, so again, my offering is taking that and just thinking about your own experience with that. So think about when you're in conflict with a partner, think about if someone pulls out in front of you when you're driving, think about maybe if you see a spider, if you have a phobia, think about what you're activated into. Do you go into that fight or flight, and what does that feel like in your body? You know, usually your heart rate will increase, you will feel that adrenaline surge, you maybe want to run away. Maybe you get really like angst up and you feel really anxious, or it will send you into the dorsal, which is shut down. So then maybe you want to hide away, you want to retreat, you want to numb out. So thinking about, even for example, conflict with your partner. Maybe for you, when you're in that space and you're activated, you pull away, you try to avoid, you shut down, you scroll on your phone. Maybe you go the opposite and you get quite activated and you argue and you're really outward with your hand movements and your heart rate increases and your tone of voice goes up. So just really thinking about when you are in, you know, fight or flight or in dorsal, how is that for you? What's your lived experience of that? And again, compare that to glimmers. So when you're in a glimmer, when you're in your ventral nervous system, when you're feeling regulated, how does that feel for you? How do you know that you're feeling more regulated? How can you tell that? And again, think about connection as the core piece of it. So one of the things I just want to say as a side note here is that when we're talking about dysregulated states of being, regulated does not mean being calm. And regulated is not something that we will always aim for, because life is not always about being regulated. What it's about is being able to spot any moments of dysregulation and downgrade back into a regulated state. So being able to work through that. So I just don't want you to have a misconception that you should always be in a really ventral state. You should always feel really calm. You should spend your life completely surrounded by glimmers, because that's not how it will work. That's not what life is about, or anything like that. So Glimmers are regulation, triggers are dysregulation. So again, just noticing that. So that is basically what I was just talking about in the last slide, the difference between being regulated and feeling dysregulated. And the more you tune into your body and the more you become somatically aware of the responses to these things, you will notice what your body does when it is feeling activated or dysregulated. So when healing, it's important to bring awareness and understanding to your triggers. So like I said before, usually in our healing work, what we tend to focus on the most is things that trigger us and parts of self that maybe we want to understand that aren't best serving us. And usually they are tied to internal wounds, really vulnerable parts of us that we have just worked to protect, or we have built a mask around for, our adult life. One of the things that I think now, doing the work that I do, is really, really an important part of the process with any of my clients is finding their glimmers. So allowing them to have a healthy healing journey, because when we just focus, when we just focus on our triggers, what we can tend to do is go into spaces and feel quite activated, either leaving them, especially if you're healing trauma. Don't stand on the keyboard. I think especially if you're doing any type of trauma healing, if you're working with really, really vulnerable parts of self, you can go into spaces, you can go into healing spaces, and you may feel like extremely exhausted after sessions. You may feel not well, resourced. So what I mean by that is not leaving the space feeling okay. Maybe you just feel really upset or really activated. And there can become this notion of only focusing on triggers or only focusing on things that are quite not negative about you, but are quite painful or quite vulnerable. It's essential that you find your glimmers because they support this healthy healing, like I've just said, and allow you to be resourced effectively, which allows you to process these difficult emotions that are coming up when you're exploring anything that triggers you or these vulnerable parts. So does that make sense? So it's important to notice and have awareness around triggers, because these are the things that are going to help you, progress, grow as a person, develop, be better in connection, understand yourself better. Of course, you want to notice your triggers, because then you want to be able to react to that and respond in a healthy way. And also to protect your peace and protect yourself, because often the things that trigger us, usually they aren't good things that are triggering us. So it allows you to set boundaries, all of these different things. Really important to notice your triggers. However, to be able to process properly and to be able to have that regulated, ebb and flow in your healing journey, it's so crucial to know what your glimmers are. And I think this is a really kind of a missing piece of the puzzle when it comes to healing. So if you're doing trauma, I want to say that this is crucial. So if you're listening to this and you're working with anybody, any type of coach, any type of healer, any type of therapist, and they've not spoken to you about your glimmers and how to self-resource, please, please, please don't be afraid to bring that into session, because it's so important. Ask whoever is holding space for you about, can you explore glimmers? Can you explore how to self-resource? Because if you are doing trauma work, that is something that is going to massively help you. A, not be re-traumatized, B, effectively process the trauma, and C, connect to your body and learn how to regulate. And essentially what we want is, as for me anyway, as a practitioner, what I want to be able to do is educate my clients, so when they stop working with me, they're able to hold this space for themselves and hold these things in their awareness. Does that make sense? I don't want clients to come to me and feel like I have all the answers, because that's not what it's about. That's not what healing is about. That's not what being a facilitator and holding space is about. It's actually about being able to help clients understand themselves, understand how to self-regulate, understand what works for their body, understand how to feel resourced. So if they are triggered outside of sessions, they know what to do in a safe way. So a glimmer can be anything. It can literally be a pet or a loved one. So I always say that little Cecil is such a glimmer for me. Somatic practice such as dancing, using oils to really ground in with smells. It can be lighting a candle now that we're getting to winter and the nights are getting darker. It can be plants in your space. It can be anything. It can be walking in nature. It can be exercise. It can be really conscious connected breath. It can be meditation. It can be conversations with other people. It can be connection. You can hear Cecil in the background. It can be connection with others. So anything that feels like it fills you up and it helps you feel safe and it helps you feel presence or be in presence and feel a sense of like joy and peace, okay? So anything that helps you feel happy and calm, does not matter what it is. And you go out and find your glimmers. It could be reading a book. It could be going to the gym. It can be anything. So before delving into any deep or difficult trauma work, I recommend that you find some glimmers. So this is why I'm saying if you're having the space held for you now by a practitioner and you've not spoke about glimmers, either do it yourself or take this into space with them and ask them, to explore this with you. Especially if you're doing deep work, especially if you're doing difficult trauma work, any type of trauma work, to be honest, should have resourcing before you delve into the trauma. You shouldn't just be delving straight into the trauma. You should be doing a lot of resourcing before it. You should be finding your glimmers, because when you're in a space of activation about your trauma or you're delving into any deep work, stuff is going to be activated, wounds are going to be activated. So glimmers and resources are the things that are going to help you down-regulate, come back into your body, come back into that ventral space where it feels safe for you to be in your body. So over time with practice, your body and your nervous system will start to register the safety that glimmers bring. So it is a practice. If you're somebody who has been in hyperarousal for so long, fight or flight, or you're somebody who's been highly dysregulated, who goes into dorsal and is quite shut down and disconnected, because your body, or whatever state you're operating in, but if there's a belief that your body doesn't feel safe, one thing I want to say is that's okay. We don't need to force you to feel safe in this moment, but what glimmers actually bring to you is they actually start to register in your nervous system. And like I said I think I've said in a couple of episodes, your nervous system is one of the most important things about you and your body and your being. So much of how we show up in the world is due to our nervous system and the stories that are stored in our nervous system and the space that we're operating from. So at any one point, there's 3 stories stored in our nervous systems. No one person only operates in regulation. No one person only ever operates all of the time feeling safe and connected. As human beings, as on this incredible system that is inside of us, it always has these 3 states that are being activated or can be activated at any one time. However, if we bring extra layers of trauma in, if we bring disassociation in, if we bring body image issues in, if we just bring general disconnection in, if we bring high levels of stress in, which so many of us are feeling nowadays, if we even bring in this collective trauma, what we're feeling, our body a lot of the time is operating in disconnection, and our body a lot of the time is, or this is just from clients that I'm working with, is feeling unsafe to be in the body. And again, we're not taught how to be in our bodies. So this is all relearning, okay? And then you bring these extra elements in. And if there's trauma in the body, the body is going to do everything it can, or you're just how you are, just your being, the way that it works when you've experienced trauma. It is going to do everything that it can to disassociate or disconnect you from your body, because the trauma is stored in the body. So it's an incredible protective mechanism. If this does resonate for you, just take a moment. One of the things that I've been doing with clients is just, instead of us being judgmental and critical around these parts, these dissociative parts, or these dysregulated parts, or any of these trauma parts that are coming through, just really, really honoring that and bringing that into space and just showing some gratitude, like how incredible that your body works that way. And okay, I appreciate that maybe, it's causing some difficulties and it's stopping you from connecting in many ways that you want to, and it may be causing you some pain. But instead of being really critical and judgmental for that part of us, can we just take a minute to honor that your body is protecting you, and your body is doing what it so amazingly organically does to allow you to show up in this world in the best way that you possibly can when you've experienced something traumatic. So just little things like this really show an appreciation for parts of self. So coming back to that point with practice, so just because we say something feels nice, like a glimmer, it doesn't mean that we don't have to put any conscious awareness into like noticing the effect and how it feels when we are in glimmers or when we are around things that make us feel safe. So just really getting curious when you're around something that you think is a glimmer, just notice that. Just have as many glimmers in your days as you can. So for me, for example, Cecil is a glimmer. Every single day he brings me so much joy, he brings me so much love, he brings me so much peace. So he is a massive glimmer, and I want to spend so much time with him as I possibly can. And I love snuggles with him. I love him sleeping on my bed in the evening, because I wake up in the morning and just straight away, like, I feel so joyful and so peaceful. Plants are another massive glimmer for me. My glimmers are very much around like my somatic external experience, like how does that translate into the feeling that I want to feel inside. So for me, it's very much like smells, really like certain light. It's probably why I love this time of year so much, to be honest, because I love lights, I love candles, I love just warmth of being in a house. So just all of these different things for me serve as like glimmers. And then breath work is something that really feels like it's resourceful, but only a certain breath work. Massages are a big one for me as well. So that's just some examples of like glimmers for me. But one of the things when I was going through this on my own journey is I would notice, instead of just turning up to a massage and going, oh yeah, this is a glimmer for me, I would really notice how I feel when I'm on a massage table. Like, why is this a glimmer for me? What does this make me feel? And over time, what I was able to notice, so again, linking back to that felt sense, what I was able to notice is I really like relax. Like, you know, sometimes when you don't realize how much tension and how much you're holding on to in your body. And I noticed that, especially the body work that I get done now, I relax and then I relax again. And then I fully relax. And it almost feels like this internal part of me. I don't know whether it's like fascia. I don't know what it is, but it just relaxes. And that takes me like some time on the table to get into. But in my head, we just go, oh, it's a massage. It feels relaxing. You know, for me, I noticed that the feel of touch and certain points on my body, like my favourite is getting my feet massaged. But I got really curious about, why is that a glimmer for me? I mean, not just thinking about it because of the obvious, because a massage should relax me. So as you're going about, you know, integrating these glimmers into your life, just getting really curious about, how is this making me feel on a somatic level? And when we think about, you know, felt sense, I'll go into that a little bit just when I've spoken about this, just in case you don't know what felt sense is, okay? So how to find more glimmers. So write down the things or people in your life that make you feel good, the people that make you feel resourced. Become more present with life. Glimmers are all around you. So take some time to notice, pause, and take a deep breath in, you know, your life. So again, because we're on these very like stressful lives, there's a lot of urgency on us. Think even about like responding to emails. We live in such an urgency culture where things are expected of us straight away. So what that means is we're not really present in life. We're always go, go, go. We're always thinking of something. We're always thinking about the next thing that we have to do. So when you become more present, and again, if there's disconnection or disassociation here, presence can feel a little bit more difficult because maybe it doesn't feel safe to be present. So it's just integrating presence in a way that works for you. Because if it doesn't feel safe to be present, you know, sometimes that's because in being present, you're with yourself, and internally there's all of this stuff going on. Maybe there's some like wounds, some vulnerabilities. A lot of the time there's some trauma. So when we slow down and we actually spend time with ourselves, the mind can kick in and just make us consistently think about something, or make it really difficult for us to switch off. Or the body, again, being in that hyper aroused fight or flight state, will stay in that continuum of go, 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 in order to avoid sitting with self. Okay, so just whatever presence looks like for you, try to integrate that a little bit more, and just take some time to notice and just pause. Like I said before, noticing when you are in a glimmer, or noticing in your life what feels like a glimmer. Oh, Cecil, I didn't know you were there. So another one for me is the moon. Another one for me is the sunset or the sunrise. They are just incredible things that are free, that are part of this magical world, that happen every single day. Just the world, Mother Earth doing her thing, and they feel like glimmers to me. Practice gratitude in moments when you notice feeling happy, content and calm. So just like I said before, just pausing in that, just being thankful for what you're noticing, just being thankful, letting your body know that, letting your body register that you're in a moment where you feel calm and you feel content. And then noticing the felt sense in your body. So this can be hard if you're disconnected or dysregulated, but starting to notice anything in the body helps. So noticing the felt sense, like I said before, during triggers can be overwhelming. So when we are triggered and we have that and we have that somatic response, often what we will do is disconnect from that or avoid from that, because it can be really painful. So we are automatically wired as human beings to want to avoid that. It takes practice to be able to sit with that feeling of being triggered and notice that. So it can feel overwhelming. That's okay. Especially if it's a trigger and there's some trauma in the body. You know, if there's certain parts of you that are living in trauma time, then that can be, you know, really, really overwhelming. It can feel scary. It can feel like you're losing control. So again, when it comes to working through the felt sense, it's just being able to notice in a way that feels safe enough for you to be in presence with the body. But one of the things that you can do to help strengthen your felt sense is notice your glimmers and notice how your body responds to cues of safety, calm and regulation, which is something that I said before. So, you know, when I spoke before about being able to notice how your body is responding in these moments. Okay, so the felt sense. I'm just going to talk a little bit about that because I feel like it is important. So this was coined by Peter Levine. Peter Levine is somebody who is the somatic course that I am doing. He is the founder of the somatic experiencing, I think off the top of my head, and he does a lot of work in the Embody Lab, which is where I'm doing my somatic certification at the moment. And he basically states that the most basic experience of being alive comes from within. The relationship and awareness that we have with ourselves and our awareness of our being. So our internal world and our external world, they coexist. Like I've said in this episode, our nervous system determines so much of how we show up. You know, people think it's all about mindset work. It's not. Trust me, it's not. This is the work. This type of stuff is the work. Mindset work, it has a place, obviously. It will get you so far, but it's like the cherry on top of a multi-layered cake is mindset work. So when we think about the felt sense, what it allows you to do is come out of the monkey mind and into the lived experience, into connection and feeling rather than blocking and numbing, okay? Noticing your felt sense brings you in to your body at a rate that feels safe, and it really strengthens self-trust. So when we talk about the felt sense, all that is basically doing is noticing any sensations or noticing any tension or anything that you notice in your body, not attaching a story to it, not attaching a trigger to it, not attaching a meaning to it. You just notice what you notice, and it is what it is. And this is one of the ways that I will really start to, if I'm working with somebody who is quite disconnected from their body, or even if, you know, like one of my clients that I'm working with at the moment who has PTSD, there's a real disconnect there and there's a lot of disassociation. So what we just started to do was to bring her in with felt sense. And even when I'm not doing trauma work, because a lot of you would be amazed how many of us are disconnected from our bodies. So many of my clients, women, are disconnected from their bodies for a multitude of reasons. I said crap in the start of this. It was not crap, but that's what I meant. The multitude of reasons. And the body isn't a safe space for a lot of us. The body is not a familiar space, and especially because we're not taught how to express our emotions. So a lot of the time when we're disconnected, when we drop in, it can feel really overwhelming because it just feels like a mass of emotions, and it's really difficult to like pinpoint one specific emotion. So when you tune in, so all you have to do is you can sit with your eyes open, you can do it as you're driving, you can do it anywhere. All you notice is what you're feeling in the body. So the way that I will do it with my clients is just either ask them to gaze down if it doesn't feel safe to close their eyes, and I would just say like, what are you noticing? And they might laugh and go, oh, like a twinge in my knee. And I'm like, okay, stay with that, let's explore that. Let's just stay with that twinge in your knee. And then what they notice is that twinge will then move maybe up their leg, and then they'll notice a tightness in their hips, and then they'll be like, oh, I didn't actually notice how tight my pelvis was, and I didn't notice that this part of my leg was twitching a little bit or maybe like throbbing a little bit. And that's all it is, we just notice. And then sometimes I might invite them to explore it with, what colour would it be? If it was a shape, would it be a shape? How does it feel? Is it like a heavy block colour? Does it feel a little bit like, would it be misty? Does it feel a little bit polka dotty? Does it feel fluid? Is it solid? And there's all of these different ways that you can then start to somatically and creatively explore that felt sense. And here's the catch: you're not going into the trauma, you're not going into the wound, you're not going into the stress. So therefore, you're able to be in presence with your body in a way that feels safe, because you know that you're not preempting, activating anything, or going into anything that feels unsafe or scary. You're just simply being with sensations in your body. So when we talk about the felt sense, that is what it is. It's such an amazing tool and technique to integrate into your own day-to-day living. You know, if you're working with somebody, again, my offering, and they're trying to get you to connect to your body and you feel quite disconnected, you can either offer this to them and see if it helps you connect more, or you can just do this and notice and track your felt sense. Okay, so that is that. So then the other little piece that I want to go into, it's kind of similar to Glimmers, but it's just resourcing. And resourcing is something that helps set the foundation in pretty much where you can begin to process trauma. So again, I'm going to use trauma, but resourcing is really beneficial for anything, to be honest. And I think, you know, there's internal resources and there's also external resources, and both of these serve like Glimmers, to be honest. But I just think there's something really nice about being able to resource. So again, if you're doing work with a coach, if you're doing work with a therapist, if you're doing work with anybody in healing, being able to resource. So resources are something that come up for me in sessions with clients if we're doing activating work, if we're doing triggering work, and I note, or we're having like a release in session. So what I will do is pendulate clients in and out of that. I will not keep somebody highly activated for too long. It might just be like a couple of moments where they're activated, and then I'll bring them out of it again, because it's not good for the nervous system to stay highly activated. So again, just a side note, if you are working with anybody and you feel like you spend a lot of time in activation, just being mindful that that's not always beneficial for the nervous system. And also, it's not the only way that you can really deeply process, you know, trauma that you are experiencing. So resourcing is, again, like I've just said, something that I bring into space if a client is activated in trauma or a client is activated in something. It's something I will bring in. So a resource can be external or internal, anyone or anything that supports our well-being. So it is very, very similar to a glimmer, but when we think about it in terms of sessions, what can be really nice is like a visualization, or sometimes even just like a safe space. So sometimes, you know, I've read when other practitioners have used almost like a meditation with clients to, you know, visualize somewhere that feels safe, visualize somewhere that feels calming for you. So that's another little way that you can bring in a resource. And it's just really nice to be able to notice these things. So when we are resourced, we really are able to strengthen our capability and also massively strengthen our resilience. So resilience is a massive thing, because I done a really amazing module around this in the training that I was doing, and we looked at what is the meaning of resilience. And essentially, when we think about healing any part of ourselves, the main concept is resilience. The same with trauma. It's that resilience to be able to process, integrate, and move through, you know, the trauma that's been stored in our body or the trauma that we've experienced. So I think resourcing is amazing for helping you with that as well. A couple of other things, like, you know, it's amazing for self-awareness, for coping strategies, for mindfulness. So just thinking about resources, thinking about those internal and external, thinking about ways that you can make yourself a resource, thinking about anything that supports your spiritual, mental, physical, emotional well-being is a resource, and thinking about things that you can draw on in sessions if you're doing any deep healing work, if you're doing any trauma work. That feels different maybe to a glimmer, because maybe a glimmer is something that you might go home to, or something that you can do, or like a pet or a family member or whatever it might be. Think about, if you're thinking about a resource, thinking about something that you can bring in session. So for one of my clients, lavender oil is a resource that we use in session. And if you are working with a therapist, or you're working with anybody in person, integrating your resources into space, or your glimmers, is amazing. It's such a beautiful way to help just really create that co-creation for your therapist, for your space holder, to hold more of like a really personalized space. So I make sure that every single time I have this one particular client in, I have lavender oil, and, you know, I will offer that to her. If we're doing a resource at the end of the session and I'm getting her to go into like a meditation, I will rub lavender oil over on my hands and just hold them above her nose. And I know that that's a smell that really grounds her, that really resources. Another little resource and technique that I used with one of my clients, which was really beneficial, was a grounding in and connecting her to her body, but connecting her to the, almost like a body scan, but noticing, you know, like the hardwood floor, really, really zooming in on different parts of the body, but not going in, not paying too much attention to the body, not being in the felt sense, basically just getting her to notice how it felt to be supported at every single part of her body, and then asking, can she just relax a little bit? So zooming into the point where it was like, you know, your toes, can you relax your toes? Can you soften in? How does it feel for your heels to be supported? How does it feel for the back of your head to be supported? So again, if you're looking for it in a resource that is more somatic, that's another really nice one as well. So it may be beneficial for you if you struggle to connect to your body, if you struggle to be in your body, all of these different things. So that is this episode, Glimmers versus triggers. We also spoke about the felt sense. We've also spoke a little bit about resourcing, and yeah, just trying to find some internal and external resources that feel good for you. You know, so a bath might be one for you, but a bath might also not be one for you. Really noticing, and it's interesting, I done a session with my client and we were talking about resourcing, and she couldn't think of anything. The only thing she could think of was her dog. So we paused kind of doing any more somatic work, and that was almost like a little mini homework, is to go away and just find some more resources, find some more glimmers that she can draw it on, because that way when she's coming into space and having these, you know, processing somatically the trauma, when she leaves the space, she's able to regulate, be connected, feel safe, and it just works in like a beautiful rhythm, a beautiful ebb and flow to support your healing journey. And it's not just healing trauma, it's any type of deep healing work or anything when you're feeling stressed. This is not just relevant to healing. This is relevant to you if you're in a stressful job, if you're having long days. Bringing glimmers into your day to help you downgrade your nervous system, to help regulate your nervous system, to help you feel calm before you go to sleep. So you're not going to sleep feeling activated, feeling, and also so you're not living your life feeling massively under-resourced, because that is what creates disconnection, burnout, absolute exhaustion, is when we don't have that capability. And it also hinders our resilience. It hinders our capacity to process. It hinders so much about our healing journey and us as humans. So I hope this episode has been helpful. Cecil seems to have loved it because he's fell asleep next to me. And yeah, I would love to know what stood out the most for you about this episode. So enjoy your rest of your day wherever you're listening to this, and I'm sending so much love from my corner of the world to yours, and I shall be back soon for another episode.